After months of bummer news, after things going the wrong way, things are actually, I think, trending in a positive direction for Penn State football. We mentioned that would happen once they hired a new head coach, and here they are with a hired new head coach who is in his fourth day on the job. Ryan Snyder is here to talk about Penn State recruiting and all the various things going on this week. As you were never not busy, Ryan, but you certainly have more direction, it seems now, as far as where to go, what to look at, and who to talk about when it comes to Penn State recruiting now. So, hey, what's going on?
Yes and no. What I would say is, and I'm finding myself in this trap right now. We're gonna discuss a lot of these guys, but there's a lot of players who decommitted and things like that from Iowa State, but they haven't handed out any offers yet to these guys. And don't get me wrong, they're very busy. There's a lot going on. But that didn't stop them from offering Samson Gash. You know what I mean? So I'm in this spot right here where we're going to talk about these guys, and what I know about them. I'm still learning a lot myself, so I don't want to come off as if I know detailed information on a lot of these guys, because I'm still trying to figure that out and learn who to really focus on. But again, I want to see who gets offers and all that. Just point blank. I mean, this is a new level for Matt Campbell and the staff, right? Let's call it what it is. There's a higher bar here, and I'm sure there's going to be some of these guys who end up coming over to Penn State, but this isn't like there's a handful of 4 stars that would fit in right away. So that's all. And again, I'm trying to learn a lot of these guys. I was trying to find testing numbers on some of them, like kind of get a better feel for how athletically, where they kind of stack up compared to what we know, who's already on the roster. And of course, there's going to be so much turnover. That's why I think it's inevitable that some of these guys come over. But at the same time, I do find it interesting here that, a couple of these guys have been decommitted now for a couple of days, and they haven't made moves on that yet. So yeah, we'll see whether that's because they're busy or whether that's because, they're not sure if these guys are right up to Penn State caliber. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, and that's going to be a question, because we've had a couple of different conversations about Matt Campbell and his recruiting philosophies and beliefs. And by the way, one of those conversations is coming up tomorrow. That is Friday if you're listening to this on Thursday, or you can go check it out if you're listening to this on replay on Friday. Josh Pate is joining the channel for another conversation. We're giving him a victory lap because back 2 months ago he said, hey, who'd be perfect for this job? Matt Campbell. So we got a chance to talk to him this week, and he agreed to come on the show. So we're going to be giving that to you tomorrow. I want to say noon. So be looking for it on the Blue Wade Illustrated YouTube channel. He and Fitz have a conversation about everything going on with Penn State football, Matt Campbell, and some of these things that Ryan's talking about. The transition from Iowa State to a new level and the evaluation process, all that stuff going on behind the scenes that we're desperate to know, that I'm just so eager for you guys to find out and for us to be able to learn together through the film. One thing that we are going to find out all together, how this is going to play out, is actually at Michigan. So start with the breaking news from last night. Sherrone Moore has been fired at Michigan for cause with a situation with a staffer. I have read a bunch of different things. I don't know exactly what is reportable at this point, so I'm not going to get into that. And really, that's not the point, is to look at a car crash on the side of the road for somebody's career, but more the relation of this to Penn State and recruiting for a Power 4 school that you've recruited against, and there are relationships with Penn State, let's just say Penn State, and a lot of the players in the Michigan class. Is this an opportunity for Penn State to salvage some of the 2026 recruiting cycle now that there's been this big shakeup over in Ann Arbor? So, Ryan, I know a lot of this is fresh and new, and I don't even know all the rules here, because signing day happened. This is happening within the window, right, of the early signing period. So just from that perspective, can you give us the lay of the land as the rules as you know it about a recruiting class signing and stuff like that?
Yeah, if they want to get out, though, I mean, Iowa State's guys are getting out, no problem, right? The NCAA is not going to stop that. We were having this is a little bit off topic, but we were having this discussion on the board the other day. A lot of people were like, well, what about Kevin Brown or Matt Sieg or some of these guys, who were committed to Penn State? Do you think that they would maybe want to flip back now? It's if they were going to do that, Penn State guys wise, who were previous commits, that's a much more difficult fight. I think they would have to probably more so go towards the portal. And truthfully, I don't think many of those guys are really itching to get back right now anyway. I think a lot of them are offered more money. I think a lot of them are comfortable with their situations. And I know this isn't the Michigan, but I just want to get that part out there.
No, I think that's important too.
Yeah, it's a lot. Look, those guys had the opportunity to wait, and they didn't, right? They signed, they had 50 plus days to figure things out. It's a lot different for them. So I want to just kind of make that clear, off the bat when it comes to the 2026 former Penn State commits. But anybody who has signed and then had a coaching change after, there shouldn't have too many issues. At the end, like I said, we've seen 4 or 5 Iowa State guys get out by now. I would expect that some of these Michigan guys will do the same. Now, with that said, how that's all going to play out, who's going to come out, that's going to be interesting. I know everybody's going to want to talk about Carter Meadows, Marky Walbridge, obviously Sabian Hyder. There's some really good
Titan Davis had some. Yeah, Titan Davis had some relation to the
that's
previous
actually
staff.
Where I would kind of start though too is we know Deion Barnes is or we think Deion Barnes is staying. I feel like we would have seen more with Deion Barnes. It sounds like Deion Barnes is staying.
Yep.
We know he's still here at least, right? And he still seems to be recruiting for Penn State. So I think he's sticking around. Had that relationship with a guy like Titan Davis, kind of went underground a little bit at times just because Titan was kind of quiet and, he would go visit a lot of other schools, didn't visit Penn State a ton, but there was a close relationship there. Would he be a guy, that would consider looking around, maybe consider Penn State? I think he would be one to maybe keep an eye on. But also he has a lot of other really quality options too. So Matt Ludwig's another guy that kind of is interesting to me, a tight end out of Montana. He came and camped at Penn State when he was young. Now I don't believe he had a lot of ties or visited Iowa State staff a lot. He had a lot of. That was one
thing I wanted to do today that I didn't get enough time to do was go through and see how many had Iowa State offers or had any connection to the.
Yeah. I mean, I want to do that too. We'll get around to it at some point. But like Marky Walbridge, I know his name was discussed. I do think he fits Penn State really well. But also, Phil Troutwine was a major reason why Penn State was kind of top 2 at the end. Don't think Troutwine's staying around. We expect Ryan Clanton, to formally be announced here at some point, the former Iowa State offensive line coach. So it's just hard to answer. I feel like we're going to do this a lot today, and I'm just warning people now. Like, everybody wants answers, but it's
right. Let me. But
right
I think the important thing here, Ryan, is that I agree that you're not going to have all the answers, and that's totally understandable. But the parameters of how to think about this, I think, is really important as well. You mentioned the position coaches. Sure. How much do those guys? Their situation is up in the air. Also up in the air is the recruiting staff, but maybe there's more of a path for some of those guys to stick around if they want it. How does that play into this? And that's what I was curious about with you of, Kenny Sanders, Alan Zamitis, those guys that have been building relationship with these guys that aren't on the actual coaching staff. Do you know like how they fit into this picture and could bridge the gap with some, make those introductions, smooth any of that over if possible?
I would think that, you would think that Matt Campbell would want to keep those guys around. Penn State had a recruiting staff of 14 people. That was not the case at Iowa State. He's going to need some people to stick around, I think, at least, or I think it would be wise for him to do that. But we don't know yet. We do not know. And I asked about it yesterday. I tried asking about it yesterday and got it's still up in the air kind of answer when it comes to potential recruiting staff sticking around. So I think Campbell's got a lot on his plate. It feels like, to me, and it's not really a surprise, right? Because it feels like Campbell was kind of added or came into the mix suddenly late. And it feels like to me that I think a lot of other situations that have been maybe worked out sooner, Florida, other schools, like their situations, they feel like they have a better understanding at this point of who's all staying and going.
There was work done before, right? There was work done before in the negotiation process of here's the staff, what are you thinking? And then, some of Nate's reporting was that they were even getting into that point with Kalani Sitake, and then suddenly none of that mattered. And then you pivot, and now here we are. So it is interesting to see, the news. This is we can have a quick aside here, by the way, to talk about some of the news that we've heard. Official this morning, Stan Drayton is going to South Carolina. We heard yesterday Jim Knowles is not going to be retained as the defensive coordinator. He's going to Tennessee. Neither of those guys were here very long. So imagine in a recruiting aspect that doesn't really factor into these relationships or this conversation. But I just want to get your thoughts on, those coaches not being part of the staff this year after what was supposed to be a superstar staff assembly last year. didn't work, obviously, and is
Yeah.
kind of being scattered to the winds in college football.
From a recruiting perspective, Knowles really didn't do a whole lot. I mean, and that's not a knock on Knowles. That's just how the coordinator model worked under James,
Right.
where, he didn't really make Andy Kolnicki do a lot of recruiting outside of on campus, of course. Obviously, when guys get here, they interact. But I don't think that's a major deal from a recruiting perspective. Danny O'Brien certainly had relationships with many of these guys, but I mean, I wouldn't say Penn State's quarterback room is stacked to the point right now where you're losing a whole lot if there are outgoing transfers and all that. And obviously, Peter Bork ended up going to Michigan. He'd actually be a guy to keep an eye on, maybe potentially, but since he's at 2027, Keegan Crozier go to Ole Miss. Like, there wasn't a ton of massive wins here down the stretch. I think Troy Hume was probably one of their better ones, especially after watching his senior season where he did really well. But I don't. To me, I think at least, like, keeping Kenny Sanders, keeping Alan Zamitis. I think Dex is an excellent recruiter too. I don't know if he's going to be sticking around. I kind of get the vibe he's not. But the fact that they are keeping Terry, and I think they're keeping Dion, that those are two big ones there. We'll see with Dan Connor. I get the vibe Dan Connor's going to be sticking around as well. But they have some guys here who have those strong Penn State ties, know the area. Those are all good, I think, for Penn State. But to me, I mean, I keep coming back to Kenny Sanders and AZ. Like, they feel like guys that if they have options elsewhere, Penn State should pay them, because they you don't want to lose those guys. They're massively important with the 2027s and have some relationships with these 2026s to potentially flip some guys.
Yeah, and have done a great job, I think, and could be. Well, we talk about the recruiting angle with Kalani, and I don't mean to keep coming back to this, but I was having a conversation this morning of the fit is better with Matt Campbell than Kalani Sitake, and that is true, right? And how Penn State kind of fell into this really good match between themselves.
I don't think we know that yet, though.
But this is so. This is what I wanted to get at, is that neither have recruiting ties to the region, and so, like, there is from a cultural fit, a guy from Ohio fits better than a guy from like out west, and that's fine. Like, I'm not going to push back on, like, anyone can walk in anywhere and feel comfortable and at home. I think that's fair. But this is the part I guess I'm talking about with Kenny Sanders and with Alan Zamitis and the recruiting staff, is both of those guys are going to have to rely on the institutional knowledge at Penn State to get these recruiting relationships at high schools kicked off. And then from there, it's whether or not you're a good coach to coach communicator and a guy that can relate to those people to get in with those schools. At least that's how I understand what you've described over the years. And
I think so. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I think it's important. Sure. Sorry.
I just wanted to bring it back around. I just wanted to bring it back around to, like, Gonzaga and Travis Johnson in Chesapeake. Just trying to think of the guys that I noticed from last year who were really quality prospects that ended up choosing Michigan, and what the ties are to those guys with maybe the people who are around right now. To, if you can speed run this, maybe some of the guys that you think, where those relationships lie and where they might be strongest outside of the position coaches.
Yes, there's really not a lot. I mean, Kenny, Kenny and AZ certainly have roles with that, but Rashad Elby had a big role. Slim had a big role. I mean, there's a lot of guys who are going to Vatech that, had a big role in a lot of these other recruitments. So, the answer
this is a blind spot for me, by the way. So I'm kind of asking you this because I want to learn. There's the inner workings of that are, I think, opaque to a lot of people. It's just interesting now to think about those guys, put them under the spotlight, and not to just, those are the two names everybody knows because they're two of the more high profile guys. But it just does seem very interesting that there is this opportunity with Michigan and identifying where you can strike while the iron is hot, if that's even possible with these players, because some of the reporting has been, and Josh Pate talked about this yesterday on his show, that it was known internally that Michigan was this was a possibility. Michigan was going to do this for a while. So maybe all these players are on board. They know this and they're not going to waver. But if there's an opportunity, this just feels like the biggest situation Penn State could take advantage of to rebuild 2026, which, as we know, they absolutely would love to do. And so it feels like a gift from the football heavens. And I know Penn State fans are excited to see if that's something that's realistic. And
it could play out that way. But I don't see it. Like, I don't think Penn State's going to get like 6 of these guys or anything like that. I could see, maybe one or two of them visit in January. But there's so much has to play out. Like, first off, there's no visits are even allowed right now. So for the most part, if you're, one of these guys who, especially, I mean, if you're obviously enrolling in January, you still have a couple weeks to figure it out. But who's Michigan going to hire? Michigan's going to get a great coach, right? And how does that factor into things? So it's just really, I'm not trying to. I feel like we're going to do this a lot today, and I'm not trying to. But there's just so many unknown answers at the moment to really give you an accurate feel for the chances they could get some of these guys. I think again, Deion Barnes with guys like Titan Davis and Carter Meadows. Yeah, there was very strong relationships. Penn State was top 3, 4, 5. But those are guys that are also going to have every school you can think of knocking on the door. And, the longer it takes for Penn State to get stabilized over here and really hit the ground running recruiting wise, the more of a disadvantage that is. So I feel like they're still kind of stabilizing. I feel like I thought later this week we'd see kind of more offers going out, some more conversations with 2027 guys. There hasn't been a whole lot of that. Really hasn't been yet. So I think we're still maybe a couple days away, maybe sometime next week where that really picks off.
So one thing that they've made very clear, and one thing that, just as a teaser coming up tomorrow, is that stars are not as important. Talent is not as important as fit for Matt Campbell. So, just because Carter Meadows is the 6th overall player in the 2026 recruiting class, at least from what we're being told, and, we're still getting to know Matt Campbell on this end, but the people who seem to know him pretty well, and what he said himself is that it's more about the player and the evaluation rather than the talent. And you can't just accumulate talent and make that work. Although I think a guy from Gonzaga might fit okay. And then, a guy like Marky Walbridge, having watched him, I think he fits because he's a pretty damn good football player.
Right. That's the biggest question I have, and we're not going to have an answer until June, is can they recruit at the big boy level here? Because this is a whole different ball game. I've really been trying to go through Iowa State's classes. I'm trying to do a story of just like, how well do they really recruit as far as finding guys and developing and finding hidden gems and stuff. And it's kind of hard to do that because it's just a different kind of level of recruiting. Like, it's just not the same. And obviously when I do that, right, I want to compare it to Penn State and how they could do it here. And it's just not the same. It's a whole different level. And that's, we're going to talk about some of these 2026 guys who decommitted. There's certainly some things there I like, but at the same time, a lot of those guys' best offers were like an Iowa State, right? So,
right.
Are you trying to recruit with that level? Or are you trying to recruit against Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, yada, yada, yada? And that's where
we'll figure it out. The other question about that too is, I know that what's the benchmark? So you get a guy and he's very productive in the Big 12. And again, like, over the years, that's meant less because the Big 12, the top schools have been siphoned off to the SEC. Mm-hmm. So you're like, I think we've seen it where you see Texas Tech go out and pay a lot for positions in the transfer portal that are fundamental to football. And like, they boat race the best other team in BYU. If you're productive in that league, this has been what I've been wrestling with, is if you're productive in the Big 12, does that translate to the Big 10? Like, genuinely. And so, like, if you're saying this guy, the only other benchmark is, did they go to the NFL? And that doesn't always translate to being a productive player that can help you win, even in the Big 10. There are guys in the Big 10 that are great college football players that don't go on to have great success in the NFL, but you would call them a recruiting win. So there's a lot of apples and oranges here for everybody, and it's been very interesting to try and work those things out, especially for me. Like, watching Rocco Becht has been a absolute roller coaster the last couple of days looking at his film, and I recruiting, I imagine, is going to be very similar until things get kind of leveled out here.
Agreed. I think we're still a week away or so, but there's going to be an offer surge. There's going to be this week where recruiting just blast off again. I kind of thought we'd be there by now. The fact that we're not kind of tells me that
I imagine they're focusing on the staff and
he has to, and
the players, right? So like what you currently have versus like, and then the next step would be,
I also wonder how much their recruiting staff is focusing on the transfer portal too at the moment, because we're going to talk 2026 and maybe some of these guys coming over and they have to figure that out as a staff, who fits and who doesn't. But at the end of the day, we're still talking about the portal being 70-80% of what's going to be the talent acquisition for this team in 2026. So
What percentage of that do you think is going to be from Iowa State? Because I just like everyone's expecting the entire roster to come over to Happy Valley and specifically want to say, yeah, well, JMU did it with Kirk Cignetti. And so I just like, I don't know. I don't want to just assume that everybody at Iowa State is better than everybody at Penn State because Matt Campbell is better than James Franklin in everyone's mind. So we're going to just assume everything is great at Iowa State. And I'm looking at the film and being like, I don't think this is good enough. And everyone, and by everyone, I mean just like the consensus of the internet that doesn't want to get into the details, which is what our job is to do and to kind of discuss those things.
They certainly have some players, but I don't think it should be a massive amount. I can see, 10, a dozen, I don't know, but something like that. But look, we got to also see who's in the portal, right? And we're still a couple of weeks away from really kind of realizing the full pool and other guys that they can pick from, and guys that maybe just have regional ties that want to get back. So it's just a lot of unknowns at the moment, I guess best way you could put it. What I will say is that I expect them to be very aggressive. I expect them to be more aggressive financially than we've seen in the past, and that should help. Certainly, you would think land some bigger names. I guess I'm not thinking the top of the line guys, but I do think that they'll be at least attempting to get some of those guys that fans actually know their names from school X or school Y or wherever it is.
Everyone wants Nick Marsh in the transfer portal, and maybe, but
he's a good player.
Doing some of the work on the Iowa State receivers, they, again, just like, it was a weird year. The passing game was super inconsistent. It started out really bad. So if you watch like the game that they did week 0 in Ireland, I would have thought none of those guys could play. And then by the end of the season, things started to get picking up a little bit, and you saw the talent there. So Chase Soule from he's pretty impressive. Like he's a pretty impressive athlete. And again, like, the inconsistency of production to me was the most confusing thing, but the talent when you watch him run and cut and jump and catches.
Yeah, he grabs my attention. Yeah, that's a guy. I was doing that transfer portal story I just posted today. I'm kind of looking at guys they've added to the portal over the years, and who are their hits, who are their misses, all that kind of stuff. And Sewell was certainly one that I didn't. He wasn't a Jaden Higgins that just popped and, was an incredible player, but like there is something there to work with. I like Trey Bell too, the cornerback. I don't know the thing with Terry staying, and we still don't even know who's going to be the cornerback coach, right? Like what's Terry's role going to be? But with him staying,
there were 3 quality corners in that room that, maybe had some ups and downs this year, but generally are talented and don't have to leave if they don't want to. But, you usually expect attrition with guys that are older.
Right. So it'll be interesting. I mean, who was the other one? There was, Quentin Taylor, I believe, was a good-looking corner for Iowa State. But who knows? We're still a couple weeks away from really knowing there. I don't want to speculate too much on that stuff. That's not fair to those players. But,
and I haven't. I got to the other player. So I'll speculate because that's what I've been doing.
Hey, how about it?
Marcus Neal Jr., the safety, immediate fit. That's the guy I think from the secondary that you can identify pretty quickly.
He was their best player on defense this year, from what I understand, right?
Yeah,
or one of them. Certainly, difference maker for him.
He played the Zakee Wheatley role, and there is a certain bias towards that player who's always around the football. That's why he's there. Like this is kind of I struggle with this in my mind of he's there, and so that he gets all the stats, so then he becomes the best player, but he's in position to make those plays. Now he made a lot of plays, and I'm not trying to discredit what he's doing. I guess like it is in the end, it is like they put him in a position to make a bunch of tackles, and then he made more than he should have at that position. But there is always a little bit of bias of the role you have in the defense as to whether or not you have the opportunity to make tackles. Because if you're a free safety and you're shutting down a passing game, but no one ever targets you because they know not to throw to your side of the field, then like you don't get the stats. And so he's in a position in that Zakee Wheatley role to get those stats. And I would say like it is a very one-to-one comparison of their roles, very, very similar. He was a more aggressive run defender, and I'm assuming they're going to be keeping a 3 safety defense, which may put him right in the middle. I think he would be a perfect fit for what we've seen and what they probably want to do. So that's another guy, that makes sense as a senior, probably wants to stay with the staff. Quickly, we have to tell you to transition to this. And I don't want to say quickly because I want to give our sponsors their time in the sun for being amazing and supporting this show for as long as they have. And that is Andy Ludicky at My Perfect Franchise. If you are here in the holidays and you're like, you know what? There were a bunch of things I wanted to buy, but it just wasn't in the budget. And you're like me, and you're like, well, I just need a bigger budget then. That, as we all know, requires you to make some more money. And one of the best ways to make more money for yourself is to start making money for yourself and not for somebody else. Because when you're working at a business, you are making money for somebody else. Consider if you have the skills and you want to leave the corporate rat race, you got middle management experience, you know how to run everything, you do all the stuff anyway. Why not do it for yourself? If maybe you're looking for a side hustle, you're an entrepreneur, and you just thirst for the unknown. You want to diversify, build wealth, doesn't matter, leave a legacy, fulfill your American dream. Check out My Perfect Franchise. Andy Ludicky is a franchise consultant with extensive experience placing people like you with the perfect franchise to manage. Whether things are booming in the economy, there's a downturn, it doesn't matter, there's always something moving. And Andy has his pulse on those things. He knows the franchise business, the things that are rising and falling. He's always transparent about what he thinks is a fad and will try to point you in the direction of finding the right franchise to manage based on your level of financial availability, how much money you got to invest, and your skills and your expertise. 404-973-9901 is the number to call to get on his schedule, or Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. I'm here just to tell you about Andy. I don't know anything about business. I could pretend I'm great at BSing through most conversations with people, but if you want the actual information, go talk to Andy. His services are 100% free to you, and he'll help you go through the process if you decide to follow through. So, as always, thanks to Andy for being a sponsor here on the show and supporting On3 and Rivals since the very beginning. So let's get into the recruiting aspect of this. We talked about the portal and all those things. We'll get back to the portal in the end, but recruiting is starting to kind of ramp back up. As Ryan outlined, none of these guys officially have an offer from Penn State, but there are names that are now in the mix. So if you want to, Ryan, just talk to us about some of these guys that Penn State fans should know that you've been following and learning more about over the last couple of days. You're muted.
Sorry about that. My fault. So right now I think they have 5 guys who have decommitted. Truthfully, when I look at them, their 2027 decommit, Will Slagle, is the one that pops off the top. In my opinion, is a guy who would fit best, I think. Another guy that I kind of like, and as I continue to learn more, is Pete. I think it's Iglesias, offensive tackle, 6'7", 290, out of Columbus, Ohio.
They like their tall tackles, by the way.
Yeah. And that's a good thing, right? But what I got to figure out is, can he move? Those are the kind of things.
Yep.
Because we know this is what makes it so hard, though, is we don't know who's leaving this line, but we know the standard that was here, right, as far as athletic tackles, and that's kind of what I need to figure out about Pete. But
yeah,
Slagle certainly stands out. Just talking to guys who have scouted him better, like Charles. They think that this is certainly Slagle, at least certainly a guy that would fit with Penn State, and I think he will probably visit in January. At least he's aiming to visit in January. And an offer wouldn't surprise me there. Had a good talk with Slagle the other day too. He's a Iowa State legacy too. His dad and his uncle played there, so how that impacts him down the road, we'll see. But also very close with Clanton, very close with Matt Campbell, and that staff. So I think that Penn State will certainly be in the mix with him. But again, he's a 2027, right? So there's a long way to go. Let's see who also offers him and stuff like that. Out of the 4 2026 guys, again, I come back to just, I really want to see who gets offers and when those offers go out and all that stuff, just because I'm trying to really kind of figure out if they're Penn State level or not. Someone like safety Bryson Williams, for example, I believe, where's he out of? He's out of, I'm sorry. Is he out of Omaha?
Nebraska?
Yeah.
Nebraska?
Mm-hmm. Right. Like his best offer outside of Iowa State was basically Vanderbilt. That's not, he came kind of later onto the scene, had some, smaller G5 offers and some 1AA kind of offers throughout most of his recruitment, and some P4 schools really picked up on him at the end. But again, is that Penn State? How does he fit? There's so many questions. We don't even know who the D coordinator is. How they're going to run. Like, it's just so many questions right now that just, I think that's a big reason why maybe you're not seeing some offers go out. Because again, like, sure, they're focused on staff and figuring out the building first, but again, that didn't stop them from offering Samson Gash. So if there are some guys that Matt Campbell's like, hey, absolutely, I think they would be offering them right away. And I think that's kind of where we're at in the process. Like wide receiver Marion Jackson, for example, another player where certainly there's some things that pop on film. 6'1", 185. He's also out of Omaha, by the way. His best offers were Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois. Some quality schools there. But is that Penn State level? His rankings top 1,000. So it's not like a 1,800 kind of ranking, right? We've seen some of those where it's like, I don't even know how to be honest with, when they're that low. I don't know how well they were truly scouted anyway. There's just so many guys that I don't know how much time you can put into every single one of these guys. But these are the big questions here. I do like Iglesias. I do think looking at where all he camped and the interest of a lot of schools. Pitt, Georgia Tech, Missouri, Louisville, those were some of the schools he seemed to have serious interest in. But, he also camped at some major schools, and that tells me that, the Georgias and some other big programs were certainly interested in him, and that's an encouraging sign. But again, I'll just keep coming back to who's leaving and how does he fit into, what is already in this room. It's kind of hard to say at the moment, to be truthful with you. So last one guy too, wide receiver Cash Brock. Really late riser out of Bash in Arizona. That's Chandler, Arizona. I believe that's like basically suburbs of Phoenix. Bash is a really good school out there, but he came on the scene late as well. His only other P4 offers were Arizona and Northwestern. Had a really good senior season, 960 yards, 10 touchdowns, and that's on a team that is stacked with talent too. So those stats certainly pop to me. But is this a Penn State caliber guy? So
they like bigger receivers.
Sure.
Sorry to jump in here, but I just noticed this. A couple guys 6'1", 6'2", they obviously have Jaden Higgins and Soul, who we've talked about already. Like, they got some big dudes out there that they seem to. I'm trying to piece together what this staff prefers and what they look for of measurables and stuff like that. I haven't seen a ton of like 5'10" guys that have gone through there and been like targets or been big names for them. And I'm sure that there are. Like, I don't want to say like, oh, there are none, but the names we keep bringing up, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", like they like some tall receivers out there.
Right. So, those are really the 5 guys right now. I'm sure I'm still going through the rest of their class, so I don't want to speak too much on, the guys who are committed to Iowa State and all that. I'm trying to learn. These are all brand new relationships, man. I hate sound like what.
How do you feel about that?
But it's just.
How do you feel about like meeting new people and like, is it I've got all the heavy lifting, or do you like talking to people, right?
Oh, absolutely, and I like building relationships with people. That's great. The thing that's difficult in this situation is, 1, these guys don't have answers. 2, they're seniors. One thing we've talked about a million times is like, you get the foot in the door with sophomores and juniors, and it's really easy to do the job then. But by the time these guys are seniors, they want nothing to do with the media for the most part, just because it's becomes overbearing, and you got people blowing you up when you're trying to make decisions on your own. So that's a little bit difficult when you're trying to do that at this late in the cycle. So we're chipping away at that and see where things go and take it from there. But and truthfully, I still don't think like there's going to be a ton of 2026. There will be some. But I still think we're looking at a class that'll be fairly small. I could see Samson Gash. Let's get into. Can we get into Samson Gash? Because that's a guy.
I was just going to say I wanted to transition to that, which are the uncommitted guys that you've been following, and you mentioned Gash a couple of times. So tell me more about Samson Gash.
Yeah, obviously he's son of Sam Gash, of course, former Penn Stater. Played with Terry Smith. Terry Smith actually was the one who offered him. I think that was Monday, right when we were about to do the press conference, I think, for Matt Campbell's when that all went down. So there's some really strong ties there. Good, tested well at Penn State. I just don't know. Like, he didn't quite put it all together as a junior, I guess you could say, as far as film perspective, but he's always been a very good athlete. This year he did put it all together, which, by the way, he played with Ben Ezekiel on as a Detroit Catholic Central, I believe.
Oh, nice.
Great kid, though. This makes sense. Like, this is a player that, like, Penn State should be able to sign a legacy prospect who's always had a lot of interest, very good ties with Terry from a family perspective. He's a late riser, or not, I wouldn't say a late riser, excuse me, but he's a guy who's been rising in the rankings is the better way to put it. And we have him as a Rivals 300 guy. He's now a consensus 4-star at all 3 sites. Like this is what you want to see, certainly like from a Penn State perspective. Like I do believe he could fit here to some degree. We have him at 6 foot 185, by the way, out of Detroit. So this is a guy that, like, right now, if you made me pencil him in or put in picks, like I would probably lean towards Penn State. He's still technically committed to Michigan State. I don't get the vibe he's itching to stay there. We'll see where things go there, but I think West Virginia is another school to potentially watch for maybe a visit in January. But he's absolutely going to visit Penn State in January, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if he switched not long after that visit.
So just kind of as you're mentioning January a lot because these guys want to visit first, and so it'll be kind of in the February signing period as opposed to there's not going to be guys that just go, hey, guess what? And then around Christmas they're committing to Penn State. Like it's more, these are more like there's going to be a process here, and the second signing window is going to be more of the plan instead of Penn State's not going to get 6 of these guys before January 1st. Which
is why I keep coming back to, like, okay, we haven't seen these offers go out. Yes, they're doing all these things, but I do believe, like, the recruiting staff right now, they should be focused primarily on the transfer portal and these guys that we expect to go, or, even if they're scouting potential Iowa State guys, whatever it may be, like, that's the more immediate thing. Obviously, you got to hit the ground running with that. And I don't know that they fully understand or know who all would be leaving the program yet, but whenever I've asked about it, I asked someone the other day, I was like, hey, just trying to get an idea on some pre-writes, like, any leads, yada, yada. They literally said, write everyone. So that's like kind of where we're at here, because it is still a lot to be sorted out. So, I still think, like, I think the average numbers we've seen of our coaching changes, or not even the average, but some of the more notable ones were, high 20s, low 30s, mid 30s, even. That's what we've seen in the past at a lot of schools. When Jonathan Smith took over at Michigan State, and Kalen DeBoer took over, Kurt Cignetti. I think Kurt Cignetti was one of the higher ones at maybe mid 30s or so. Like I do think that's kind of a realistic number, what you should probably expect as far as incoming, outgoing, stuff like that.
Gotcha. Have we talked about Israel Abrams yet? Because that's the one I think everyone is excited about. Is
absolutely, you should
top quarterback prospect that was interested in Iowa State, and now obvious speculation. Where is that in terms of what you've been following along with his interest in Penn State specifically?
Oh, he's going to be a guy that visits at some point, and that I expect Matt Campbell and his staff to really push for. Very good relationship there, really with Campbell and all members of the staff. That was the interesting thing too. Is I was asked about Jake Waters, for example, their quarterback coach, who was a former Penn State recruit at one point back in the day. Sean and I were enjoying seeing his growth as we were researching him not too long ago. But one guy he mentioned too is like Trent Slatnow, who came over with Derek Hoosier. Derek's going to be the GM. Trent was previously the director of player personnel at Iowa State. He spoke really highly of that relationship and, how that really kind of helped put Iowa State in the driver's seat. And, he flat out admitted, he's like, everybody knew, where I was leaning, which was Iowa State. He's like, that wasn't a hidden secret or anything like that. So, you're talking about a player right now who is certainly I think a top 10 quarterback in the industry ranking. Excuse me, industry rankings have him at number 3. Rivals has him, Rivals has him at number 7, and really when you look up and down, the top quarterbacks, there's really only a couple guys that I think are really even still out there, and Israel is without a doubt the most realistic for a school like Penn State. So, I think we're going to be talking about him a lot. They still haven't technically offered and all that. Like I said, I just think that there's a lot of moving parts, but this is a guy I'm pretty confident they're going to have to push for. And they will push pretty hard for. He had a heck of a season, dude. Like 4,000 yards passing. I mean, it was like, I forget what the touchdown was. 40 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He had this really impressive duel with Trey Taylor, who's a commit for Nebraska. In one of their playoff games recently. Like every time he gets tested in big moments, like this is what Charles was really pointing at. He shows up, right? And that's what you want to see, obviously, out of your quarterbacks. But Israel Abrams, awesome kid, great family. Putting up really impressive stats, really impressive film. This is a Penn State caliber player, and no doubt in my mind. And this is a guy that I expect them to push hard for.
Yeah. So
until Peter Bork decommits, then we talk about Peter Bork again. No, I'm just
kidding. And 2 quarterback class, right? That's what everyone's going for. 2 quarterback class.
Yeah.
It just seems like there's more movement for 2027, and for recruiting, I guess I'm going to just say the thing, like, focus more on 2027 for recruiting as opposed to 2026. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Not even. I mean, like I said, I can see a couple of these Iowa State decommits, coming out and visiting and potentially signing and enrolling at Penn State. But yeah, without a doubt, man. I mean, their focus should be on 2027. Like, you can make up the loss of the class in the portal, and you can do that over 2 years too. You don't have to do that all this year. They have to hit the ground running in 2027 because Notre Dame hasn't stopped recruiting the area. Ohio State hasn't stopped recruiting the area the last 50 days. All these schools have gotten massive edges on the Matthew Gregory's, the Khalil Taylors, the Maxwell Hillers, all these really good quality players. I didn't even mention Keemon Spell. Penn State's been in purgatory for all that time. That's going to be the class we should judge them on, obviously, of course. And that's to be where they're putting a lot of their focus here, I would say, at the end of December, once they get done with transfer portal recruiting. So it's actually probably a little more early January where they can shift that focus.
And Terry is going to be a big part of that, right? I imagine.
Absolutely.
And part of, do you think, this is just, I want your opinion here, not necessarily anything you're reporting, but like with Keemon Spell, who trimmed his list of schools, Penn State wasn't on it. Is there an opportunity for them to get back in there, do you think? Or is it just too late and they don't have a running back coach right now? So like, it's not really realistic for a guy who's as talented to be on the list. So, what do you think? Is there a chance?
It's going to be
okay.
hard. I do. I think Franklin had a big hand in that as much as Stan Drayton as anybody. But the big thing with Keemon, though, is like Penn State, for those kind of players, you got to get your foot in the door early and get early commits. And they did that. But now that he's gone out and visited all these schools, like, all it takes is one school to really push the chips in. And I don't know how worth it really is to do that with running backs as well, because you can find quality running backs down the board. Like, so that's the interesting thing with me and Keemon. I mean, to me, like, I would say it's going to be hard, if not doubtful. I would lean towards. And that's why, like, Matthew Gregory, Maxwell Hillers, like, there's so many other talented guys in the area. By the way, like, Kelvin Morrison's a really good running back out of Hickory. Isaiah Rogers, we haven't brought up in a while, right? Like, there are some quality running backs that they can get.
Yep.
And I know he's not Keemon Spell. I understand that, but they'll be okay. Like,
Isaiah Rogers is pretty impressive.
Isaiah Rogers kicked ass at some camps this year. He was really, really impressive. So to me, it just.
Do you mind if I just tell a quick story of, like, we were at a camp and I'm like, oh, Keemon Spell's here. And it was not Keemon Spell, but like, just looking at Isaiah Rogers, dude is jacked and he had the same frame. Like, he had a similar frame. Spell might be a little bit bigger, but like, they were close enough that I didn't know Keemon Spell's face. And I just went off of, oh, there's a 5-star running back, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like, very, very good prospect, Isaiah Rogers.
I would also be very surprised if Keemon doesn't visit again. I know he put out like a top 5 the other day. There's been a couple of those over, like, to me, even if he does end up committing at some point to another school in the next month or two, whatever it may be, like, I'd still be really shocked if he doesn't use his official visits in June and really kind of do one last search. So Penn State will have an opportunity to get in the door there. I just think there's other ones that are more realistic at this point in time and who are very good, and that's where you can get your wins easier in a staff in this situation, if that makes sense.
Let's talk about something interesting you wrote over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I think you put it up right before the show, the transfer portal, success recruiting, kind of a breakdown of what Matt Campbell did over at Iowa State, identifying players in the transfer portal, good and bad, because when you look at the numbers in the transfer portal in our rankings, which I don't want to criticize our rankings, but they are very much based on volume. And they're based on how many 4 and 5 stars you get out of the portal, as opposed to, and how are you supposed to know, right? Like the results are very different, but if you don't have a lot of volume and you have a lot of outgoing, it does reduce your ranking. So Iowa State never really ranked highly in portal recruiting, but it doesn't mean they didn't go into the portal. So what did you find when you dug into that as to the actual players in the class?
pretty similar to Penn State in the way that they have grown in using the portal too, which I think is probably, if I went all over and looked at different schools, it would probably be similar from that perspective. But a couple guys early on really hit on Xavier Hutchinson. Now, I will say Xavier Hutchinson was a JUCO guy. I don't know who wants to consider that portal. It technically is portal, but I know some people look at that as a little bit different. But Xavier Hutchinson, wide receiver, he's with the Houston Texans now, ended up being an absolutely massive hit for them. I mean, he graded out as one of the best receivers in the country for 2 years straight. Had, I think, just under 3,000 yards receiving during his time. And, of course, like I said, went on to the Houston Texans. So that was a really big win for them early on. He was the one guy who really kind of stood out in that early class, and I think it was 2020 for them. But they also got a pretty good tight end of that, and Deshaun Haneke too. He was just behind Charlie Kolar. What I mean? So he made an impact, did special teams. There was a lot of things there that worked. He just was behind another former NFL tight end. So to me, that was a successful class. And the 2021 class, there really wasn't much. They took a kicker.
That's very early in the portal, right? 21 was like the first year of the portal, right?
2022 is really where money got more involved. And it really was 2023 was more so. That was when it was like, okay, this is becoming bidding war kind of thing. This is why all these guys are going in. But 2022 was also, I thought, a really good class for them. Colby Reeder, do you guys remember Troy Reeder, of course, former Penn State linebacker. Colby Reeder ended up being a really good player for them. It stinks that he actually missed he missed four games or so with an injury, but in the 8 games he played, he graded out as the top linebacker in all the Big 12 that year. And he was a 1-year kind of guy, but to find a guy like that from Delaware and then develop him and put him in a good situation to grade out very highly in the Big 12, I thought was great. And I'm using PFF just from the example of it's easier to kind of compare them, especially I'm not watching all these games from 2022, but he graded out, I think there was like 350 linebackers that year, and he was like top 30 or so. So I thought that was a really good win for them. MJ,
I need to get you to use position grades, by the way. Are you using overall grade?
Oh, yes.
I need to just a little tweak is like if you go into like his run defense grade, because like maybe he's got a terrible pass rush grade and it weights down his overall grade. The overall grades I always feel like lack context and nuance, where none of the grades have context and nuance, but at least the position specific ones always have a little bit more. But to your point, good football player.
T. Frank, I thought I was doing good, man. You
are.
But here's what I'll say, though. Here's what I'll say is, early on, I thought they had some really good wins, and I thought we saw that with Penn State as well. Dating back to, was Arnold Ebiketie, right? There was Chop Robinson, I think what year was Chop?
20. That might 21. Might have been the first class.
Yeah, I'll take one. Yeah.
Tangelo.
Either way, my point is, we saw very similar results, and then it became a bidding war. And that's when Penn State started to struggle a little bit, and so did Iowa State. When you look at 23, 24, 25. Now, in 23, they had 5 guys. Really only one of them made a massive impact. I mean, Zachary Lovett was a linebacker who played 3 years for them, in a backup role, did over 400 snaps, right? So I look at that as a success. But Jaden Higgins was the one that really stands out. And you'll notice the 2 guys I raved about, receivers. Well, you found the right school to find some gems at receiver for, because
I made that joke on Tuesday on the show when I was like, you notice in his press conference, it was very ironic. The first thing he brought up was, hey, we nailed our portal receiver evaluations, where Penn State went 5 years and couldn't hit one.
Yeah. And JC and VA, I see your comment there. I totally agree with you. I do think that'll kind of be, especially this year. I mean, this year is going to be interesting just because it's, there's a lot of times where JC's saying is like, well, how does bringing in player X impact player Y? We saw that with was it Julian Fleming and Keandre Lambert-Smith to some degree. I mean, that was part of the reason Keandre was not happy. Not that Julian came in, but the fact that Julian was kind of immediately getting paid and Lambert wasn't as much. And then he went to Auburn and had a decent year. And I think Keandre's still in the NFL, right? I thought I saw him playing.
He was on the Chargers in the preseason, and I believe I saw him in a regular season game, but I haven't really kept up. I don't know if he's playing like actively for them.
Right. So, but JC, they're totally reset in this locker room, right? So there's not really too many worries about pissing off player XYZ. That's not really going to matter this year. So that's a good thing. I think what we're going to see with time is how is that handled in 2-3 years from now, right? As far as, not trying to upset this room. Go ahead.
This is also one that I think if I'm trying to read the room, and I'm going to throw this up here. And by the way, we got a super chat here I want to get to a little bit later. But I want to save it for a second because not necessarily part of this conversation. But Ryan says, am I reading the room wrong that Campbell and Kraft see the transfer portal differently? Seems Kraft wants to spend and get the best. Campbell is more like James Franklin. Yes, I don't believe you're reading the room wrong. I think that it's TBD about how Campbell is going to use money and the role money is going to play, but he absolutely is the evaluation, high school recruiting, and transfer portal to supplement missing pieces in the roster and find developmental guys that fit your style. He's not going to go out and just bid for the highest, the flashiest thing in the portal. He's talked about fit above all else. And that leads me to, I guess, the point that I'm curious about is James Franklin didn't want money to fracture the locker room. And when they started losing and things were frustrating, money became an issue from what you guys have been discussing here on the show. And Nate has alluded to that.
Yeah.
It can always happen. But I guess that's the thing I keep being told about Matt Campbell is like money won't be an issue. And so upsetting guy X because they went into the portal and got Y doesn't seem like that's the plan because they're all focused on winning football games. And if the guy you bring in helps you win football games, then you shouldn't care what your bag is versus his. That should be the theory here. And like, I guess that's going to be, to me, the biggest question is that was the idea with Penn State, but it felt like they were more sensitive to the feelings. I don't get a sense that Matt Campbell's going to be sensitive to the feelings just based on his interaction with us a couple of times and just the way he conducts himself. I feel like those things are going to be a little more taken care of, if that makes sense.
We'll find out. Yeah, we'll find out. I don't think that's inaccurate. I kind of get that vibe as well. But I also would just say that I think we have 2 years until we can really judge that. Like I said, this year is going to be a free for all. And guess what? Next year probably will be to some degree as well, as far as like we may see more portal activity these 2 years than at any point previously. And hopefully if Penn State is gets to where they want to be and are established and the program's healthy and all those kind of things, it should be, going into 28, 29, into the next decade or so. So, but I do think it's just going to take time to really judge that because, like I said, I mean, at 30 is a number that makes a lot of sense, more than that possible. And, next year it's not going to be perfect in year one, especially with kind of how things have dragged out. And, oh, by the way, James Franklin is still in Blacksburg. He's not that far away. Like they're going to get some guys and it's going to take some time to really kind of get the room to where he wants. And I think that's why we're going to see a really big portal year this year and a, sizable one compared to other years next year as well.
Let's hit on this quickly. Well, first off, I can't wait any longer because somebody donated $100 to the channel and that's like, wow.
Whoa.
Yeah. BSticks816 says, just wanted to send you guys some money for a few beers and cheesesteaks. You've put up with ridiculous amount of abuse on Twitter, and it's unacceptable. Some of that's my own fault, if that's what you're referencing. Thank you for covering the whole coaching search day by day for us. Also, please reassure me that Coach Matt Campbell won't go to Michigan. Thanks.
No, you're good.
Yeah. I don't.
Cost $10 million.
and that's the thing is like people love to troll. That's the whole point of Twitter. And people want to troll everybody, their own fans included. And so, like, I saw that today and yesterday, and that's like, I don't need to get into like the incentive structure of Twitter, but that's basically what it is. It's like if you can say something that gets a rise out of everybody, it's going to get clicks. And so, yeah, there's again, like here's my biggest problem, Ryan, is it pisses my wife off all the time that I'm somebody who believes people when they tell me something, at least until they prove otherwise, right? Like if people say something to me, I trust that they're not lying. That's my default assumption is that people aren't going to lie to me for no reason. And so when he talks about like the most important thing to him, Matt Campbell, the most important thing to him is his word. And like being a man of his word and following through. Like, again, that's something I believe. You know, that's how I believe. That's how I go through my life. And if somebody says that to me, I'm like, yep, that checks out. Okay, I'll believe you when you say something. So he's going to sign at Penn State and then 4 days later go to Michigan.
No.
No. Also, all the other realistic reasons, all the financial and logistical reasons why you wouldn't do that.
I'm very curious to see who Michigan gets, but I mean, we can have that discussion another day. We can finish on whatever you want to do, but I think that's it's a fascinating situation because it's such a good school. I know Penn State fans don't want to hear that, but it is it's still a top 10 job. Let's call it what it is. And you know, this is happening all after the craziest coaching carousel we've ever seen. And sure, there's a lot of guys who didn't move, but a lot of those guys who were quality also got paid pretty well. So
yeah, I
think Kenny Dillingham would still be an awesome fit at a lot of schools, but you know, whether he leaves Arizona State or not is his alma mater. We'll see. But that'd be a name. That was the name I thought Penn State really should have tried hard for.
The roster at Michigan is another interesting one. I don't know. Jayshon Barham, is he a senior? Like, I'm just trying to.
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. But like, just here are like, we are in the next phase, right? And I guess this is, I want to have two things I'm going to go to, positive and negative here to end the show. First is, I said it again, I'm just going to keep saying it because we had so many bummer shows. One of our regulars was back and said, hey, so glad to be watching these again. No offense to you guys, but like, I just couldn't bring myself to watch over the last couple of months. And I get it. Like, especially for the recruiting shows where there was not a lot of good news to give fans, and we're not going to just make stuff up to make you feel better. We're trying to tell you the truth and report on what's going on. But we're in the other side of it now. I said, that's the down part. Now is the potential up part. Now there's going to be, as Ryan said, attrition on the roster, but they're also going to get like the new coach bump at some point. That's going to happen in recruiting, and they're going to get players in the portal. And there is this fascinatingly unexpected opportunity with Michigan out there as part of this conversation, but that's not what I want to focus on. So that's the positive side. I guess on the other side, let's talk about Penn State's transfer portal here, just to end the show quickly. I've talked about the offensive guys that I think are most critical for them to retain based on the comparison of the Iowa State roster and the Penn State roster. And I think offensive line is going to be an issue because you can't just find seniors from over there or starters from the Iowa State offensive line that are good enough to play in the Big Ten. And the ones that are on to the NFL or on to the next phase of their life. So who are guys on the roster now, in your opinion, that you think are critical, doesn't have to be offense, that you think are critical to retain for Penn State to be a competitive football team next year under Matt Campbell?
Really liked myself from Kemaju, right? He's a young guy who I think has a lot of promise. Deion Barnes is staying. I could also see why other schools would be poking around. I think I keep saying Deion Barnes is saying. I generally don't know that Deion Barnes is saying. I'm just expecting Deion Barnes to say. Somebody's gonna get mad at me for saying that. I keep catching myself.
I can back you up on that. I'm also pretty confident Deion Barnes is staying. Yeah. But yeah,
obviously Tony Rojas, right? I mean, if Penn State fans will be very upset if he ended up at a Vodtech. But the thing with Tony is he's gonna have interest. Now, obviously, how's he coming off that injury? That may keep his market from exploding or something like that. But I look more defensively. I mean, I guess you kind of looked over the offense a good bit, but like Alex Tash has shown a lot of promise. I think there's some young defensive backs. I mean, obviously Darius Dixon looks like the real deal. He could be a guy who makes a real impact. I still think there's a heck of an athlete in Dejon Lane. He's a guy that I'm just kind of looking at like key positions, right? And if you can have like one guy here, obviously at corner, you need a couple, but like if you can just kind of retain some of these athletes and give them, give Matt Campbell and his staff an opportunity to develop them, it could be really exciting. I still think, Xavier Gilliam was kind of put in a tough spot this year, but he's
my guy.
Yeah, I like him a lot. And he's needs to grow. Like he needs to get bigger. He was in a tough spot. He was pushed around at times, no doubt about it. But he's everything you want off the field as far as work ethic, going to push himself, going to be a leader. Like these are the kind of guys when I'm looking at youth and players that can make a big impact that Penn State certainly really needs to make a push for. And then offensively, like Owen Alcini, I think could be a heck of a player. There's a lot of offensive linemen that certainly grabbed my attention. Obviously, Egan Boer was another one.
With that one. Yeah, because you're right. Like yesterday on the show, I just put a list of all the guys that I think are talented, and I had to stop at a certain point because I couldn't just list them all. Like Michael Troutman also wasn't on the list, but is a really quality prospect on the roster. Yeah. What is your temperature of Phil Trautwein probably isn't sticking around, and then the danger of losing those guys? I mean, how precarious is the situation there, and what do you think of that situation?
Certainly a position of high interest to me. Put it that way. We've been pre-writing portal stories for far too long, it feels like. And that is one that I actually haven't dug it too much into yet because I was just kind of waiting to see what happened with Trout and Clanton and, the Chalco to Vautech. There's a lot of different moving parts there. And we, we still don't have a full answer, but we know it looks like Clanton's coming. He's not an ISU director anymore. Like that looks like it's going to happen. So, how well these guys are able to mesh with him will give us a better feel for that. But a lot of these guys are very loyal to Trout, and where Trout ends up is going to be very interesting too. If he ends up last year, Trout certainly had some interest with NFL, but I don't think it was to the level that he wanted it to be, from what I understand. I think Ohio State showed interest in him too before they filled that spot with Tyler Bowen, from what I understand. So to me, I know the O-line wasn't as to the level that some expected this year, but I still think like him and Dex should be two of the more coveted assistant coaches that they have a road to go with James if they want, but I could also see them having an opportunity. Oh, what we got here, Elliot?
Yeah, Bearded and Broke put this in the chat here while we're live. So thank you for doing this. As we're talking about the transfer portal, Elliot Washington plans to enter the transfer portal. He'll have 1 year of eligibility left, obviously, and that makes sense. That one's not a surprise given how things went this year.
Yeah, it's playing time.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't. I don't think he played in the final 2 games, right?
It was. I mean, if he did, it was just a couple snaps. Like it dipped pretty hard.
Yeah, you've been following the snap count for a while for us. Yeah. So that was
Darius Dixon emerged. I mean, obviously Darius played a lot, but Dixon played way more at the end of the year.
Well, it wasn't just Elliot Washington. I think. Oh goodness. Top corner.
AJ Harris.
AJ Harris. Sorry. AJ Harris also was starting every single play early in the season, and then after the Northwestern game, he was still the starter, but Darius Dixon cut into his snaps as well. Darius Dixon took a huge step forward in that cornerback room this year.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think AJ had it. Remember, AJ was on the questionable in one of those games, and he played, and then he had there was a mistake in one of the games, and they kind of sat him after that. I just don't know how much of it was injury, how much of it was.
So Northwestern game, Terry Smith said he got benched, and then after that, he was on the injury report, but wasn't necessarily playing great. And that's always the thing for me is I don't want to question. Again, I want to treat people's word as truth, but there was some stuff going on at the end of the season that I just was really all 4 running backs. That all 4 young running backs all show up on the injury report all at once. They're all out. They're all injured.
Yeah.
There's some stuff at the end of the year that I was I don't
know.
This doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I will say everybody thought Chaz Coleman was one of those guys, and Chaz actually legit had a concussion.
Was hurt. Right. And I don't, again, this is the problem with I don't want to spread conspiracy theories or create them, but there's just some stuff that at the end of the season where it just seems
the 4 running back thing certainly was oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah. And that was a tough situation for them all year long, those young guys, where you could tell some of them were ready to have a role on the team, and it was just going to be Nick and Katron this year, and that was going to be, especially after James Franklin was fired, it was going to be Katron. That was going to be the plan down the stretch. Okay, so thank you to Bearded and Broke for letting us get that here in the chat and to talk about that here at the end of the show. Love to be able to get that breaking news on record for everyone who wants to watch on replay and for our podcast audience who's going to be listening to this in just a few minutes. Ryan, any final thoughts? First off, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Please like the video, subscribe, all that stuff that I was supposed to say 1 hour ago, now that we're into the hour and 4-minute mark, but I always forget because I get so excited to talk about football with Ryan. So any final thoughts here, getting out of here on the show today?
Yeah, I like I said, I think I was thinking that by the end of this week, we'd start to see recruiting pick up a little bit. And again, it is. I don't want to pretend it's not. But at the same time, as far as offers goes, as far as the staff contacting players, that's still been very limited. I've been trying to talk to guys all the time. I mean, about who they're talking with and stuff. I mean, as of last night, like Jackson Ford hadn't even had a conversation with Matt Campbell yet. He has other members of the staff, Derek Hoosier, Deion Barnes, others. Yeah. But, so that's still think my thought was the end of this week. Probably more likely early next week we'll start seeing that. I mean, there's going to be a flood of offers that go out at some point. They're going to get aggressive at some point. At the same time, though, they also, I believe, know the outgoings are going to be, hefty, or at least bigger than we've ever seen for Penn State standards, at least. And that's why the portal really should be their focus. And I think that is what it is at this moment.
All right. And we're going to be following that over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Remind you, we'll have the dollar deal up here as our outro, as we always do, but subscribe there to get that information. Breaking news, I'll be breaking down players from now until infinity on the Iowa State roster. Well, I guess until January 2nd when all the time runs out. Man, Ryan, there's so much stuff to watch. Recruits.
It's going to be fun.
Transfer portal. Now, so much film, so much to get into.
Mid-January, I'll probably be pulling my hair out. But I am not. I mean, it was boring for a while. I do like it when there's action and there's stuff to write, because when you're just pulling stuff out of here, you know what? Like I'm not a big fan of that. I like I said, interviewing and meeting people and all that. So it'll be here soon enough.
All right. Well, we'll be back tomorrow, like I said, with Josh Pate. Make sure you like the video, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, and we'll be back. Talk to you then.